Hi everyone, how are you doing so far? Can you believe that we have only one more lectures to go? Time is so fast, and we are at the lecture 13, Multicultural Counseling. Well, the multicultural counseling is regarded as one of the most important the area in counseling right now, in particular in the United States, as well as the Korea. Do you remember we talked about different, some theoretical perspective on counseling. For example, psychodynamic approach, and also we talked about the behavioral approach, and humanism approach like Carl Rogers. And these are like a psychodynamic and behaviorism and humanism have been regarded as the first three the major forces in psychology. Now, the multiculturalism is regarded as the fourth force in psychology. In other words, multiculturalism is now a major trend, mainstreaming even in counseling right now. And actually, the Korean society is now experiencing the multicultural diversity right now because we are having many students from different countries. The Korea was very different from United States a long time ago, but now we are increased like diversities in our society. So the multiculturalism not only United States issue, but also is our own Korean issue as well. And also this class is, the global online class. So we have many students from different countries as well. So even our classroom is a multicultural, the whole classroom as well. So, also I expect, we will see more diversity in society as well. So that's why the multiculturalism is regarded as the major force in psychology and counseling right now. And this multicultural issue is covered by two different chapters, and I summarize in two chapters into one lecture. So I put down some objective here. The first one is identify the various components of multicultural issues in counseling. Multicultural has many different subcomponents. So we will talk about that subcomponent. We'll talk about what would be multicultural counseling. How can we apply multiculturalism in counseling? Describe importance of multicultural counseling because we see more diversity right now. So the importance of multicultural counseling has been increased. Explain stage of identity development. Many different cultural identity development theory. In particular for today, I explain some minority identity development. And I encourage you to read some more about some other cultural identity development, such as white identity development, like a majority identity development. The final thing is understand how to apply multicultural counseling in terms of multicultural competence. Multicultural competence is about the goal as a counselor. If we want to be a multiculturally competent counselor, the many theorists suggested that we have to show the good cultural awareness and also skills and knowledge. So we will talk about the three components. Well, let's take a look at the components of the multicultural issue. The first one is the race and ethnicity. Well, this one was the major issue in United States because United States has many different racial groups. For example, white and black and Asian and Hispanic. And ethnicity is in the same line. Usually the race is based on the skin color and ethnicity is based on their nationality. But anyway, we also, the Korean society is also experiencing some diversity in terms of the race and ethnicity. You know, when I walk on the campus, I see some students from different country and different race. And for example, I taught one of the course, adolescent, the learning and development, and I had one student from Africa. And so even that classroom was multicultural classroom as well. And religion, you know, we have many different types of religious group, and Christianity and Buddhism and Hinduism and some other spirituality as well. And also sexual orientation. You know, we had a conception of sex and gender in dichotomous perception. For example, male and female. However, we know there are many different sexual minority groups. Have you heard about the LGBT? LGBT is pretty common term in counseling right now. These are the acronym explain the sexual minority groups. The first L is a lesbian, gay is the opposite way, and some people has two sexual orientation, is bisexual, and also the final group is the transgender. So the LGBT is the group that has been focused in counseling. And you may see this term in more frequent way from now because it's pretty prevalent and pretty popular term. So, you know, male and female and like LGBT group, and we now know the sexual orientation is a kind of the spectrum. Okay, some people have very strong masculinity and feminine characteristic, but also in between they have some different like a sexual minority group as well. And also socioeconomic status is another the subcultural group. You know, high SES group has very different life compared to the low SES group, and they have different value, and they have different lifestyle. They have they are, you know, exposed in very different environment. So that really impact on their development as well. And also age. You know, we talked about some developmental issue from early childhood and adolescent and young adult and you know, the old people. They have different issues and they have different interests and different role and different value. So these are one of the subcomponent of the multicultural issue. So we want to consider these the component when we talked about the multicultural thing. Even you know, if you look at here, we still have a kind of conception that a multiculturalism is more related with the race. For example, I have a class like counseling and guidance, about 70 students. And 70 students is all female because Ewha Women's University, and all Korean students. And I would say all young students, like a young adult from 20 to 25. And can I say this group is a multicultural class? Yes, we can say this class is a multicultural class. It's not really multicultural and diverse like in age and race. However, we see some diversity in socioeconomic status. We have some students who are pretty rich region and rich family, but we also have the student from the opposite. even though they have different, religion, and we don't know about their sexual orientation. Even they have different, they are from different regions, so they have different speaking style and different intonation, dialect, and different value. And so actually, it looks like a not multicultural class, but it is. So I just wanted to stress again, we are still all the multicultural society. Next one, the multicultural counseling. So the multicultural counseling is the application of multiculturalism in the counseling. So the definition here and the explanation, multicultural counseling encompasses all the components of the many different cultural environment in a democratic society, okay? And we talked about the component. We talked about different race, different religion, different sexual orientation, and different the age and different SES. So the multicultural counseling tried to consider the all components of the client as a multicultural being. So together with the pertinent theories, techniques, and practice of counseling. So when we apply some techniques, we want to consider some from the multicultural perspective. Is that particular techniques will be good for that particular a client from different culture? So we want to be more sensitive to the cultural issue. Importance of the multicultural counseling. Minority clients are frequently misunderstood and misdiagnosed. I think that's the reality. And also they terminate more quickly compared to the majority group. In other words, minority may regard the counseling as not really the beneficial service, because these types of the statistics show that the minority clients terminate more quickly, and also the first one, they are frequently misunderstood and also misdiagnosed. And I also experienced this case. Let me give an example. Do you remember when we studied the abnormal development? We talked about the DSM-4, and I introduced one example of the DSM-4, who was one of my clients. Do you still remember that? One of the Asian students. So that particular client had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, in particular inattentive type. And also he had another disorder, expressive language disorder. Do you remember that? And actually, I was wondering if that expressive language disorder is well diagnosed or not one day, because when I observed him in the classroom, and in particular the cafeteria during the lunch time, he didn't really speak while having lunch, okay? And that behavior was regarded and understood as one of the abnormal behavior, because students usually talk to each other even when they're having lunch, and that student is very quiet when asked him to speak something, and he doesn't really speak. And so when I observe him in the lunch at the cafeteria situation, I found that he learned that the quiet behavior from the family, because his family is an Asian family, and his parents value very quiet behavior while eating, like a lunch and dinner. Do you see that difference? That was the cultural difference, because when having lunch and dinner in Western culture, they really, that is the time that they really connect each other, and they speak a lot, they share concern, and types of thing. But even as a Korean, for me, I learned, if you speak too much when you eat something, that's not a good behavior. You lose your blessing. So types of the cultural kind of difference. So I was able to have a sense that a certain student's behavior could be and might be misunderstood and misdiagnosed because of the different culture. And the cultural encapsulation. Cultural encapsulation means, the people from a major cultural group might misunderstand some the people from the cultural minority group because they may have some melting pot myth. Are you familiar with the melting pot and salad bowl types of theory? Let me explain a little bit here. The melting pot theory is one of the theory that try to explain the cultural mixture, in particular in multicultural society, for example, United States. This is the melting pot, okay? The characteristics of melting pot is, when we put together, for example, A component here, and B, and C, when they were put together in a melting pot, all the characteristics of A and B and C's are gone, right? Because they are all melted. So A will be transformed to another totally different D. And B will be transformed, and B will be melted into the D. And C will be melted into D like this. And so United States were regarded as a melting pot because white people and black people and Asian, they will all get together in one nation. And they are learning the American value. And that is like this. That was a little bit previous theory explaining the cultural diversity. But now the society and the counseling profession do not try to seek these types of framework in understanding the diversity. Now it's called salad bowl. It's a different. So the salad bowl is of the same container here. So we put some, cucumber and carrot and apple. We put together here. So it will be a salad. In the melting pot, the previous component lost its own characteristic. However, in the salad bowl, A is still there as a salad. B is still there. And apple is still there. But they are mixed together, and all the mixture of the vegetable and fruit, it shows better taste. Do you see the difference? So their original characteristics are preserved in this theory, in the salad bowl. So it's really like a bibimbap in Korean. So we put all together and we still have their own taste, but also better taste actually. So this one shows some cultural encapsulation from majority perspective. They don't really look at some original and ethnic characteristics of the minority group. They try to only focus the majority characteristic here. But here, still, each component and each minority group's characteristics are preserved. So they try to value their own characteristic. So, so in this case, it shows that if you look at here, the melting pot myth, one of the evidence of the cultural encapsulation, an incongruent expectation about counseling. Like white people and Asian people, they have a different expectation about the counseling. Western people are more likely to speak out their concern. But Eastern and Asian people are very concerned of sharing the problem with someone else. So very incongruent expectation about counseling from that perspective. And cultural encapsulation, the lack of understanding of external factor. Because external factor is, for example, all multicultural characteristics are external factor. The final thing is the cultural differences in the expression of symptom. As I said, the two different cultures has a different expectation of the expression of their concern. So if we apply and this cultural encapsulation, and in other words, if our understanding is limited based on some conception of the majority, and we may lose some their own issue, like based on these characteristics. So that's why we want to respect each cultural heritage and their cultural diversity as a counselor. The next slide shows the cultural identity development. And in particular, today I will explain some minority identity development. This is pretty popular, the theory. In this theory, it shows some different stage, the 5 different stages. And the first stage is a conformity. Let me give an example from my experience. When I studied in United States, I was a Korean and I was a minority, and I believe I experienced some minority identity development in the United society. The first one, conformity level. I arrived at the United States, and I wanted to study abroad, and I wanted to learn in U.S. college and the graduate level. I wanted to have a better education there. So that types of expectation gave me some positive impression on the whole U.S. society. So I wanted to conform to the value of the society. I wanted to learn English fast. I wanted to make more friends with the American. I wanted to be with them. I wanted to be connected with them. That is the stage 1, is a conformity. If you look at some other information from the textbook, table 14.2, it shows some more information about this stage. So in this stage, the attitude toward self, in other words, attitude toward our own cultural the heritage is more depreciating. However, appreciating of the majority culture. However, in the second stage, a dissonance. So in the beginning, they try to conform and they try to depreciate their own value and appreciate the whole, majority thing. But once someone experiences some discrimination, for example, and they begin to think about, is that right? Is that really good? For example, one day I was staying in the line, and I felt like I was discriminated by my race. And then that really particular episode gave me think about my orientation. I don't think everything is good, and I don't think everything is great in the United States. And that types of initial event will make someone to develop in the next level dissonance. So that stage attitude toward self, it's some conflict between self-depreciating and appreciating. So they are still experiencing some conflict in their value. And then this conflict will become kind of strong resistance. Oh, I don't really like, and they are open to a different side of their orientation. So they hear many different and in particular negative experience as a minorities. Oh, that is true. I understand why there are so many people who are talking about the discrimination. And I agree with them. I now understand types of things. So they are showing very strong resistance. Okay? So in that case, and that kind of as a reaction, their attitude towards self is more self-appreciating. Oh, the Korea is much better, and is good food, and it's just the opposite way. And next level is introspection. So as going through the stage, they were positive about the majority and begin to show some negative orientation and strong resistance. After experience the whole spectrum, they begin to think about what would be the reality, what would be the essence, what I need to do in this society. So that is the introspection period and stage. And then finally, based on whole experience and introspection, and they begin to develop their own orientation, their subjective and personal orientation. That is a synergetic and articulation. So they develop their own philosophy based on these stage. And I also encourage you to read about some other cultural identity development, like a white identity development from the textbook. And multicultural competence, as I said, multicultural competence is one of the concepts that we want to develop as a counselor in order to be effective multicultural counselor. Competencies has three components. The first one and the most important thing is the awareness. We have to be aware of cultural differences. That will be the starting point of getting knowledge and skill, because awareness is strong foundation for the next level. When we work with the client, we have to be aware of their cultural difference. Because, for example, I'm Korean and the client is American, so we may have some different communication style. We may have some different cultural value. We may have some different expression style. So we have to aware not only the cultural difference between counselor and client, and also we want to be aware that my own cultural characteristics as well. So the awareness is the first thing, and based on that, we want to have some more knowledge of the different culture. For example, if we want to work with clients from, for example, like Africa, and they may have very different culture and value. And if I don't have any experience of working with a client, we want to increase, we want to have some knowledge about their culture. So that's another thing. We have to increase some level of knowledge. Based on awareness and knowledge, we also want to increase some multiculturally competent techniques and skill. for example, when I speak and when I interpret their facial expression, we want to use some culturally sensitive skill. So if you want to read more, our textbook show as an appendix B on the last chapter of our textbook, cross-cultural competencies and objective. I recommend you to look up more information from that section. So multicultural competence has 3 components. We want to be aware of the cultural difference. Also, we want to have some knowledge about different culture. We want to know how to apply some, this awareness and knowledge with the different techniques and skills. The final slides show the how to apply the multicultural counseling. The first one, encourage client to speak their culture. Because, when we work with client, they may from very different expectation and culture. So we want to create very kind of acceptive and very comfortable climate so that the client would be able to show their own culture. Assess the cultural identity of the client, if they are minority student, and they may experience and they may be at different level of cultural identity development, and each level, they have many different developmental issues. So we want to assess where they are in terms of cultural identity development. Check the accuracy of your interpretation of the client's the non-verbal message, because each ethnic and cultural group has a little bit different way of showing themselves, in particular non-verbal message. So when we interpret their message from their body posture and facial expression, we want to be careful interpreting them. For example, what does it mean in Korean culture when I show like this non-verbal message? What does it mean? Yes, it means okay. And also sometimes it means money, right? This means money. But if you want to show money with this behavior in the United States, that doesn't make sense at all. Because it doesn't really mean money in the United States. When they show some money, they use always this, okay? So it shows some different expression with a non-verbal message. So each cultural group has a different way of expression. So we want to check the accuracy of our interpretation. Assess the impact of social cultural issues on the client. We talked about the components of the multicultural issue. Some ethnic group may have some different issue. Some, the low SES group would have a very specific issue. Some sexual minority group would have some their own issue as well. So we want to assess the impact of their cultural, the heritage on their issue. The final thing is encourage client to bring in culturally significant and personally relevant item. So actually when we see client, and I see the meeting between counselor and client is the meeting between 2 multicultural beings. For example, for me, I grew up and I was born and I grew up in Korea. And, I was in the middle in socioeconomic status, and I'm Christian, and I'm in the, adult, and I'm male, and I am cultural being. When I work with a client who are from different culture, different gender and different SES and different religion and different race, it is some, I would expect some, some differences and diversities in terms of the culture. So we want to be aware that if the cultural difference would impact that counseling relationship and effectiveness of the counseling. So that's why the multicultural counseling is very important, because we are all multicultural being. So today, we talked about the multicultural counseling. As I introduced in the beginning of the lecture, multicultural counseling is now regarded as the major forces in counseling and psychology. So, Korean society is now experiencing some diversity, but I know and we know we still need more information and knowledge, in particular in Korean society. And the American textbook, like the textbook that we are using, introducing a very advanced multicultural concept. So I hope you get a lot information from the textbook. And if you have any question, please post your question to the website. And I hope you enjoyed this lecture. And we will have the last lecture in the lecture 14 in next lecture. Okay, see you.